Hello, everybody. Welcome to Origin Story, where we discuss the lives and careers of underrepresented groups and professional fields. Disclaimer, this chat represents our views and not those of our employers, any affiliated organizations. And today we have Omar Mo with us, a professional marketer and digital nomad who happens to also own an online business. Those things seem to go well hand in hand. And we're going to talk a little bit today about his story as he's kind of gone through his professional career and how he got to be where he's at right now. So, Omar, maybe the first question is, what was your life like growing up? And maybe what were, some of the trials and tribulations you faced? Where are you from? All that good stuff.
Cool. It's an interesting question because it spans so many years. But I was born in Houston, Texas, and funny enough, that's where I am now. Uh, I lived here most of my life. I mean, I lived my younger years here, all the way probably until I was 19, 20 years old. And yeah, I mean, it was a ride for sure. When I was younger, I remember actually when I was quite young. Uh, I was a very driven individual, and I wanted to get certain things out of my life. I always had this passion, this deep seated passion to travel, right?
Sure.
And that's because if you looked at my room, it's funny, I like telling this story, but if you looked at my room from when I was a kid, I never decorated my room. I never, like, my walls were empty. I always had white walls. I mean, someone would think they're walking into an insane asylum if they walked into my room, but that's because I just never felt at home anywhere. Some people like really nest up in a place and they put decorations up in their walls and they really make it their own. And I just never had that feeling. Right. So growing up, it was always like that. I always felt uh, I was restless. I wanted to move around. I wanted to do things. I was a doer by nature, right? An executor. I wasn't the visionary. I never came up with grandiose ideas. I was a person that wanted to move around, do things, make things happen. So growing up, I mean, honestly, I had a pretty strange upbringing. So I grew up in a fairly religious household, and that only got more religious, but never fanatical, just religious, like traditional values and the whole nine yards. And because of that, as kids, I think we can start to feel constrained and we can start to feel locked down. And naturally, as you're a kid and into a teenager, you want to rebel. So
Right.
that's what I did. Did a lot of rebelling. I rebelled a lot. I got really deep into partying and drugs and a whole bunch of different things up till probably the age of 19, 20, 21. All was a flash, but I don't regret any of it because a lot of it was learning experiences, right? So me take one kid for example, the one who goes through all of this and it really dives deep into the whole partying, drugs, and all this inside, and comes out the other side realizing that's not for him, versus someone who has thoughts of doing it but just never got a chance to do it, whether it's because of family or other people, and then one day down the road they go off the deep end and boom. So I learned a lot of this stuff really early on. And I grew up, I think by like 21, 22. I was in college and I was just finishing it up, and I was in geos. I don't know how far you want me to go with this, but
Sure, sure.
I was, yeah, I was in geology out of all things. And that was honestly because I didn't know what I wanted to do. That was just because I heard there was a lot of money in geology back then, and that's prior to the oil crash, right?
Right.
Oil really started dipping down around 2015, 2016. So prior to that, oil was booming, and if you got a job, or you could graduate with a bachelor's and get like a six-figure job right away, right? So that's what I was chasing. I was chasing the money. So I graduate towards the end of it, like around 2015, oil starts crashing. My entire class is like, "Oh crap, what's going to happen now?" No one really knows what they're going to do. And I remember thinking to myself, like, you know what? I never liked geology, anyways. There's only so much you can talk about a rock. There's only so many different things that you can say. So I got in my mind that I'm going to go travel. And at that time, I had a friend who had, who had just spent 6 months in Australia. And I was like, how did you do that? You know,
Right.
how did you go and live in Australia for like 6 months? And he told me about this thing called a working holiday visa, right? So I checked it out, and lo and behold, Americans can go and live and work in these different countries because they have some sort of agreement between the countries where that's possible. So 2016, I booked my flight one way to Australia, landed there, no friends, no family, nothing, and did the whole 9 yards. And yeah, I traveled for the next 5 years, and now here I am with a business, something that's built up, doing quite well, with skills that are definitely really marketable in the market. That's a funny way to say it. And yeah, I mean, here I am. So
Love
that's my
it.
story.
So that's a bit of the Cliff Notes version of your story, and appreciate the summary there. And we maybe dive a little bit deeper into some of those things. It seems like 2016 was a good year to leave the country. We had a new presidency coming in, so you can go out every 4 years. Um, and I was curious too, just front to back from your story. So, what religion was it?
My parents are Muslim,
Mhm.
right? And I consider myself Muslim too, just not,
Right,
but more in a spiritual sense than a religious sense. I could go on and on about. I mean, I don't even care that much about the topic, to be honest. But I just don't follow the constructs of religion because I think
right.
sometimes it can be used as a crutch or something to replace your actual purpose or passion in life. You know,
I
that's where
probably had similar feelings about going to Catholic school, and that's for
I.
another episode. Um,
I think that tends to happen, don't you? Like whenever you're young and you're put into these things without your will or your free will, or because I have other family that are very religious folk and they're
right,
great and they're very open and they're not judgmental or anything, right? And we had a conversation about this, and they asked me why I went the way I did, and I asked them why they went the way they did, and they told me that their parents never pressed anything on them; they just kind of discovered it themselves. So it's kind of funny how that turned out, right? It's the
right.
exact opposite of what people happen.
And it seems like, yeah, a totally different thing when you do discover it yourself. And as your life choices come out of maybe your upbringing, how you shift, as you become an adult. And, a concept that is touched on a lot amongst my circles and friends and whatnot is reparenting. And, it's not always from the perspective that, your parents are bad or anything like that. I have similar things that I've thought about as it pertains to my parents and whatnot. But that, that as a concept is, it's kind of another way of seems of finding your own thing, and, blazing your own path and,
Right.
learning how to live life on your own terms, which also seems to go hand in hand with being a digital nomad. It seems like you have to be very self-reliant for something like that too. And then do you feel like, I know you mentioned that, you weren't as attached to it and whatnot. Do you feel like that still contributed to your identity growing up? And, maybe in what ways?
Definitely, definitely. I think religions do one good thing or one great thing, and that's teach or instill rather some really good ethics and morals in you,
Right.
right? So I definitely had a stint in my life, probably for like 5, 6 years, where I lost a lot of my empathy and I was pretty low empathy for people. And that just kind of, I mean, I don't know. I think a lot of guys go through the whole a-hole phase, just like just kind of being, I don't know how if I'm probably not going to cuss on this, but just say a hole, right? And to bring that back, um, I mean, one of my exes had a lot to do with it to kind of make me back to being empathetic, as well as
Right.
like the religious values and seeing my parents as actual people rather than my parents, and just a healthy mix of things. And I realized because of the religion that I was brought up in, and just the way that I saw my parents act as well, I became very generous as I got older.
Right.
I'm that sap that stops at a stoplight and donates to the homeless just because I feel kind of bad for them. And I go out of my way to do nice things for people without ever telling them and things like that. Just I noticed that, and I don't think I'd have that instilled in me if it wasn't for the way my parents raised me up, and the way my parents raised me up was through a religious lens.
Right.
So I think that has a lot to do with it. And I think that's not just with Islam. I think that's with Christianity, Buddhism, really any religion
Hmm.
that has that in place versus someone who doesn't grow up in a religious household. And if their parents weren't already inherently ethical and moral, they probably didn't grow up that way. You
Right.
know, so yeah, that's the way that I see it.
Yeah, and I think that there's definitely some themes coming to mind there, on my side as well. Growing up in a mixed, maybe more on my mom's side, heavily Catholic background, where it went back ages, and I myself eventually, just kind of deemed myself an agnostic. And signed, sealed, delivered. That was like my last conversation with religion. And I absolutely agree. I think that there's definite way of living that comes as part of it. And also that it may have been a code that worked for uh, millennia, even in different social structures and whatnot. But at the same time, I feel like there's so many kids nowadays that are going out there and finding, oh, there's all sorts of ways that I can go. I don't need to have children of my own, or I don't need to get married. I don't need to buy a house. And rejecting some of those social standards. And I think there's still like a piece about it. It's like it's not like they have any qualms about it, and we're like, hey, if you want to go do any of those things, we hold nothing against you. And at the same time, I think there's this thing of this kind of newfound independence, especially coming out of the pandemic, where there's kind of this rip in the space-time fabric where a lot of people are realizing, wow, like the path that's been set out for me by whatever powers that be, I don't have to live that path, and I can live independently and on my own terms.
That's right. I think it's a lot of it has to do with the internet being so mainstream in the past 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
It's just made the world a lot more connected in a smaller place, and that paired with airplanes, like the world opens up to you, right? The people of
Right.
the world open up to you. You understand different cultures from your own room. You understand different kinds of people. You see different things from sitting on your phone screen. So like all that naturally opens the curiosity of human beings. And once we realize we can do that too, I
Right.
mean, there's nothing stopping it.
Absolutely. Yeah, and on that same kind of topic, there was traveling in 2016, and the world was a different place then as well. You could, to your point there, fly wherever you like, and there was different things going on then. So with your travels, maybe from 2016 forward, what did that look like? And, where did you go? How did you manage that? How did you get around? Where did you stay? And then, when you got to the stage of, the pandemic hitting, and, air travel stopping and whatnot, what did that do in terms of affecting your lifestyle as a digital nomad? And also, like, what did you do to make money? Maybe, I know that's a loaded bunch of topics, but gives you something to chew on.
Sure. So, I mean, I started traveling in 2016. I left for Australia, right? So at that point, like digital nomad is such a vague term.
Right.
The word itself, it's just basically someone who works online and travels. And at that point, I wouldn't consider myself a digital nomad per se. I would just consider myself a plain old nomad. I mean, nomad
Right.
is just someone who travels, right? So I went out there and I did it with such a cliche reason of trying to find myself and find out who I want to be and what I want to do. And I went out there, went to Australia, traveled around all of East Australia for a year. Started in, so I can get pretty detailed here, but I'll keep it kind of surface level.
Sure.
So I started off in Melbourne, stayed there for about 3 months, made some really, really good friends. Towards the end of Melbourne, I met a German guy and a French guy, actually. Two French guys and a German guy. And the German guy's name was Daniel, who I mentioned last time to you. And really cool guy. I don't know. We just got along really well
Right.
and ended up traveling with him for the next 3, 4 months. We went to Sydney together. the funny thing is, like, we traveled together, but we never saw each other much, right? We always lived in the same hostel. We lived in the same room. The guy got a job somewhere else. I got a job somewhere else. Then I'd go downstairs, meet some people. He'd be upstairs. Like, he's more of a quieter person compared to me. And
Right.
it worked out weird ways, but it worked out, and traveled in Sydney. Sydney was my favorite city in Australia by far. I don't know why, but the moment that I got there and I went to Bondi Beach, it's like this beautiful, gigantic, like blue water, big wave beach on the
Right.
east side. I remember standing out on there. I was like, I could live here. And there's not a lot of places I can say about that. So Sydney was probably one of my favorite places. I went to Byron Bay, which is like this hippie town that honestly super hippie. We're talking like no one shaves their armpits, bunch of marijuana in the air.
Yeah.
Just like super hippie town with like selling just really hippie stuff everywhere and small coffee shops and things. Went there, stayed on the eastern side, went to Cairns, Great Barrier Reef, stood on a boat for about 3 days. And then towards the end of that trip, came back to Sydney. So I wanted to end my trip in Sydney. And my original plan was to go to China right after that.
Okay.
And I'd been planning that for like 2 months, looking at visa papers, having to fly back to the US and things. And all that changed. So I met a chick, probably like someone I actually liked. I mean,
Mhm.
towards the end of that trip, who I liked. We got along really well. She went to a place called America. She was an au pair, if you know what that means. Do you know what that means?
Very familiar with that. Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
that's pretty common in New York that you'll have international au pairs
Au
staying
pair.
with families and whatnot.
Right. So she was an au pair and au paired around Australia, and this was her first time staying at a hostel. Right. So we met at the hostel, got along really well. She went to American Samoa, came back, and while she was there, I just said, "Hey," so I was going to go to China, but
Right.
New Zealand's next door. Your visa's already ran out. Like you got nothing left on your visa. My visa is about to run out in a month. You want to come with me? And this was within like 3 weeks of knowing each other, right? She said yes, smartly or stupidly enough, whatever way you want to look at it. And we ended up in New Zealand and stood there for the entire year. It was a great trip. I mean, it had its ups and downs, obviously, especially when you just know somebody for 3 weeks and then you start living together. I
Right.
think another theme of what we talked about. Um, but yeah, we got a camper van within the first 3 months of living there, and then saw all of the North Island and all of the South Island head to toe. Skydived, cave spelunking, just deserted beaches, just like everything we saw, right?
You did
Um,
everything.
everything. We lived in that camper van. It was like this. If I could describe it to you, the camper van was smaller than my room right now for sure. Probably like from my wall here to there. You probably can't see it, but it wasn't that big of a thing. You think about like a Ford Explorer, right? That's probably a
Right.
good size right there. Lived in a camper van like that for 7 months. And you can imagine it got really dirty at points, especially when showers weren't readily available and things like that. But we did it. We did the thing. 7 months, camped around, cooked every night, ate out, things like that. Worked in between.
And what were
Got
you
two
working
jobs.
doing at the time?
So the first place I worked in Auckland. That was the first place we worked before we got the camper van, and worked at a casino, out of all
Oh,
places. Yeah, it was just like a snazzy little casino, and it was Auckland Casino. I forget what the name was. Worked there as like some sort of office worker, right? I was just looking at who they were getting money from and who they were sending it to, and I was making a log.
right.
Um, so yeah, I mean, it wasn't the most fun job, but it helped me save money. And then the second job I got was 3 or 4 months after we'd been traveling in the camper van, and it was for a drilling company. So finally, thank God, my geology degree came in handy.
Just for that
Right.
job or for others?
Just for that one job, I think that was it. That was
Wow.
the good one drilling job. I think was worth getting it right. Actually, no, I did have a job in Australia too, where I did road surveys,
Oh,
which was
wow.
also pretty high paying. Yeah, that helped too. But yeah, I did that drilling job for another 3 months and then dipped out again and saw the South Island and then ended our trip there. And then my ex and I went our separate ways because she was going to go back to Australia and I came back to America, right? So
Sure. And
now
I've
my
heard of that a
plan is
lot.
right. And it happens. It's road relationships, and we'll always stay in touch here. Like once catch up every few months, every 6, 7 months or so, things like that. So what was next? So I actually went to America at this point, was late 2019. Well, actually, I stopped in Southeast Asia for about 3 weeks. Right, I
Nice.
forgot to mention this part. Yeah,
Where did you go
stopped
there?
Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, all that area. But it was a quick trip. Bali went there.
Wow, sounds that way. What's that? Five places in 3 months?
Yeah, 5 places in 3 months. It was super quick. It was just like, hey, I want to see this because if you think about it, that's on the other side of the world, right?
Hmm.
Like we're in America. It's not like going to Mexico. It's like we got to fly 23 hours to go to Bali.
Right.
And I knew if I was going to go back to America, I didn't want to leave without seeing these places. So I did it. I also wanted to kind of get over my ex. So as soon as possible. So I went through there and it helped for sure. Um, and yeah, we went through there and then I ended up back in America. And at this point, now I was going to China, right? And think this
Right.
is like February 2020. I was just getting my papers ready. I had already signed up with a school that I was going to teach English at in China. And that's what I wanted to do. Because during, I didn't mention this part, but in New Zealand, there were key parts during that trip where I was doing some freelancing work and learning about copywriting and doing some
Okay.
graphic design and Photoshop and things like that, right? So I hadn't had a full on business just yet, but I was
Right.
doing all these things and getting my skills up. A lot of video editing, a lot of that stuff. But I wanted to teach English, right? Because I wanted that experience. Everyone goes to China to teach English.
Right.
Have you ever heard of anybody go to China for actually doing like these small English teaching jobs around the world?
No, and ESL seemed like a bit of a reach. I think I was looking at it when I was getting out of school, and it just seemed like there's a bunch of qualifications. I had a couple of friends that did it. One went to Japan, but she was like a language major, so it just kind of went hand in
Right,
hand. Yeah.
right. Yeah, these days I hear they're taking anybody who has a degree, and honestly, these days they're taking anybody that's white and doesn't even have a degree.
Mm.
So it's just because it makes your school look good. So it's pretty funny how that works out over there. But
Right.
I had already signed up with my school, and then coronavirus hit, right? So I was like, well, what do I do now? Like, what do we do here? I didn't think it was going to last that long, right? Like
Right.
everybody, I thought it was going to last like 2 weeks. Um, but yeah, coronavirus hit, and that's when I hunkered down and decided to really double down on the skills that I learned. Started with freelancing again, and then built my business from the ground up within 2 years.
That's impressive. So, and it sounds like you were studying a lot of those things while you were traveling, which is no small feat. It seems like also that the default way that digital nomads, quote unquote, do things now is working remote digital jobs, versus like you said, you're an actual nomad. You're traveling from place to place, working odd jobs and whatnot. So how do you feel like those experiences helped you to build your business as it stands now? And like what hurdles did you face? Getting from point A to point B? Did you have a savings to fall back on? Did you have a doomsday where you might run out? How did that all work out?
So you mean with the business specifically there, right?
Yep.
So I mean, I had learned a lot of these skills when I was traveling, right? And I had picked up small things. Digital marketing was something that always seemed really interesting to me because I had a friend doing it back home, and he talked about how he liked it. He was doing it for another business,
Right.
and I found something like I'm a doer, so I always found things that keep me challenged or like give me a lot of challenge to be jobs that I want to do versus something that's just chilled in a 9 to 5. And I had done small sales jobs in Australia and New Zealand too, where I had like I remember doing a call center for like a month in Australia just because I wanted a cash influx. So I had picked up these skills along the way, and it kind of just came together when it was right around towards the beginning when I started working on my podcast first. Like that was the first thing that I took off, right? And that was right early 2020 when it took off. After I started creating the podcast, like what I was doing is I was continuing doing freelance jobs and Upwork and Fiverr, and none of them was consistent. Like what I needed was money in the beginning, so I got a day job, right? I got it as a head of media slash digital marketing for a childcare place,
Ah, okay.
and yeah, and a lot of if I always tell people like if you can learn on someone else's money, then learn on someone else's money.
Right.
You know, and what I did there, I learned how to run Facebook ads. I learned how about paid traffic, funnels, a bunch of different things. video editing studios, like really like complex or more complex things that I'd been learning out there. And I really honed those skills. And it was right around, I would say, July or August when I actually started my business. And at first I was doing it while I was working the day job. And then down the road, oddly enough, through my podcast, I found a mentor and he helped me take it off, like really take it off the ground. And I'd say about October, November that year, I quit my job because I was making more than I was making at my job.
Amazing.
And then business itself just has its ups and downs, right?
Yep.
Right. So there's some days, some months that are dry, some months that are not. Some months when it rains, it pours, and that works both ways.
Right.
When it rains, you get a lot of clients, or when all clients are leaving you, a lot of clients leave you. I don't know why. It's just like that. Um, but it has its ups and downs, and I think just learning it and getting beat up along the way, and having tough days and easy days and euphoric moments and despiteful moments, like all of it put together, kind of makes you into a better business person once you get your groove.
Right.
So I think now I'm at a point where I understand it a lot at a deeper level, and I don't think I'll ever have it dry up. And if it does, then I know how to build it from the ground up again and do it all over again. You know, so
So you feel like you have to go through the school of hard knocks and actually take some spills to get to having a successful business.
that's right. I mean, you really got to go through it, and it's all about learning skills.
Right.
Right. We live in an age where skills are more important than the school you came from, the resume that you have, any of this. For example, my sister, let's take my sister, for example, right? Just because I came from her place a few hours ago. She did the whole school thing, graduated top of her class from university, graduated at an earlier age than almost everybody in her class, got a big tech sales job at VMware right off the bat, like did the whole thing, right?
Right.
Um, and she decided to move. So she was in Austin. She decided to move back to Houston just about 2 months ago. And she cold DM'd a business on LinkedIn. I think it was it was like EY or something. That's where she works now. And
How?
she EY.
Okay.
Yeah,
Just
EY.
guessing.
It's like some giant accounting place thing,
That
software.
actually does sound familiar now. Yep.
Yeah. And she cold DM'd the director of sales or something in the South Side of
Mm.
America, and said some funny lines. I helped her out with that, with the template, and she got a meeting with him face to face. They grabbed a coffee. She got the job. Guy didn't even look at her resume, just knew what
Right.
skills she had, and just knew from talking to her that she would be a good fit for the job. And now she's making more here than she did at VMware. Right?
Amazing.
Same thing applies to a lot of people now. I mean, if you can bring a skill to the marketplace that is in need and people need it, you can charge for that. And how like if you can do it really, really well, and however much skills you can bring to the marketplace, the more you'll get paid. It's as simple as that. And you can learn these skills on YouTube.
Yeah, and that is something that's interesting, versus now, versus our parents' generation. And I don't know. I had this conversation the other day, and I was talking with my partner, and about our parents and their experiences, and said maybe they would be different people if they had access to the internet. It was such a life-changing thing, and there's now all this information online, where you can just learn skills and do things off the cuff. And it's interesting how that change has been made, and then also like how remote work has come into play, more recently, since COVID started, and has essentially become the new normal. And now everybody's basically either working remotely permanently, or there's some call to return back to the office. Do you have plans right now to travel again, now that reopening is happening? And then how do you feel like remote work is a headwind for what you're doing? Maybe not even just you working remotely, and your customers working remotely and all that kind of thing.
This is an interesting topic, and I thought about this one for quite some time. Uh, for so I'll talk about myself here, and then the overall, I guess, world perspective of what I think is going to happen. Right. So,
Right.
no, do I have no plans of going back to the office ever? I'm never going to work a 9 to 5 again, without a doubt. Because once you have the skills, you can just capitalize on them one way or another. If you know what you're doing, then you know how to reach out to people or attract people to you.
Right.
You're set. Do I have plans to travel again? I mean, I just came back from Mexico for a month and a half, or Mexico and California for a month and a half. And then I'm going to be here. I'll be in Milwaukee in October-ish, September, October. And then in December/January, I head to Brazil for like 6, 7 months. So that's my plans when it comes to travel. But I mean, there was a whole month and a half when I didn't travel, right? I mean,
Right.
no one did. And at some point between there, I want to go to Canada too. But now
Milwaukee
in
to
the
Brazil to
overall,
Canada.
so I'm thinking Milwaukee to Canada to Brazil. That's what
Okay,
I'm
that makes
thinking.
sense.
Yeah, yeah. That would be way too much traveling in a short period of time.
Yeah,
Um,
Wisconsinites are honorary Canadians anyway.
that's right, pretty much, huh? So in the grandiose scheme of things, something that I'm noticing now is, uh, first of all, remote work is going to attract the best kind of talent.
Right.
I mean, why would in-office work now attract good talent when they can work remotely?
Right.
No one likes going in a rush hour, trying to get to the office, scrambling their way there. Only the old school people are still doing it because they think there's some semblance of structure and they can't figure out Slack to save their life. So that's really what's happening. So all the best talent, first of all, is going to work remotely. Second of all, the competition is going to become out of locality and more worldwide.
Right.
So if I can hire a video editor in the US and I can hire a video editor in the Philippines with the same caliber of editing abilities, or someone that I can give some business development to learn how to video edit, why would I not hire the person from the Philippines?
Right.
My margins would be higher in my business. So those video editors and people are going to have to learn to increase their skills in a way that can make them stand out in the marketplace even more and give them an edge over people that are in third world countries. Now, the one edge already that Americans, Australians, and people from the UK have is that their English is native,
Right.
right? But it's crazy now because I'm starting to meet Filipinos who have perfect English, right?
Right.
That can write good copy. So it's gonna there's gonna be a great equalizer at some point. We're not there yet, but there's gonna be a great equalizer at some point where uh, things like people who have data analytic or people who have really deep skills that jobs need, or very specialized skills that
Right.
jobs need, are going to be the ones that are going to be really set apart from everybody else. And then I see a lot of massive hiring from third world countries in the future years. And then people who maybe just had, I don't know, beginner level Microsoft Excel and Word jobs are just not going to be good enough to get hired anymore. Because
Right.
just hire somebody from a third world country in that case. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting how some of those things are coming about as well. And at the same time, there is people that are relocating outside of cities, major cities out there to maybe more mid-sized cities or even, way out in the country. And that is interesting that you mentioned there could be a bigger international focus with remote work. I think a point that I made in a previous article was that, time zones also, if you have somebody in, say, like a New York time zone, I believe that's the same time zone as like Colombia or Venezuela. And, they could basically work the same hours as somebody in the US. And then with California, maybe somebody in Chile would be not too far off from the hours over there. So there's kind of this unification of time zones that way that happens. And then also with all of the people that have relocated, what seems like permanently during the pandemic to middle America, just in your personal opinion, what opportunities might be out there for them? I mean, essentially you're in middle America, in Houston. Like, do you feel like there's a balance there? Or what can maybe be done to help opportunities in those areas?
I really think people are going to move to places that have cheaper land, right?
Right.
So, what's the point of living? I mean, so there's always going to be people that like living in cities, right?
Right.
There's always going to, whether it's middle city, south city, whatever. And there's certain iconic cities like Houston, I wouldn't say is the most iconic city, but it's definitely one of them. Austin, New York City, LA, all those places, they're always going to have people there, regardless if everyone goes remote or not. But opportunities in middle America, I think there's going to be a lot more land development there too over the upcoming years, simply because if you can work remotely from anywhere in the US, why not move somewhere where all your bills are cheaper, right? And especially if you
Right.
don't care that much about uh, the scenery or nightlife or things like that. And without a doubt, those places are going to become built up and become iconic cities at some point too, right? Because we have Austin that, I mean, it wasn't even an icon like 10, 15 years ago. And now
Yeah.
here's Austin, like almost a tech hub of the US. A lot of cities I feel like are going to start showing up like that. Middle US, maybe near the mountain belt in Montana, Kentucky, those areas for sure. Right now, if you go to Kentucky, it's so beautiful, but
Yep.
it's so remote too for all the people that are there. Like I've seen some of those communities and some of those towns, and they're just very alienated from some of the bigger cities and the culture in those bigger cities. But I think now those places are going to start becoming iconic too, simply because maybe they have a nice mountain to hike on, or
Sure.
little things like that. So I see a lot of land development happening now in mid US, which is why I think it's really good time to buy real estate there uh, over the next 10, 15 years, especially with this remote work movement. But in terms of bringing opportunities there, I mean, I think opportunity now can be found through the internet, and no matter where you move, there's going to be opportunity. I mean, I could move to the Philippines tomorrow, and I might not have the best living conditions, but I could probably work a tech job from there and make a good
Right.
living. So, but time zones comes into play too, right?
Yep.
Now, I'm not going to be one of those people that works throughout the night and sleeps during the day, but I have worked with people that do that. And if you're willing to do that, time zones don't matter either.
Absolutely. And I've worked with distributed teams, for the past 5 or 10 years, maybe even. And, like you said, there seems to be a gap there in that, if somebody's willing to work overnight, then, it sets quite a precedent. Um, Also, was picking up on what you mentioned about places like Kentucky. I was on Bardstown Road in Louisville this past summer, and it was an awesome experience. They have an amazing food scene there, and um, albeit a little bit more hipster. Those type of areas tend to attract a certain type, but at the same time, it's just like when you have this ability to have cheaper housing. I feel like we've seen a lot of pushback already on, you know, workers not maybe getting a choice, as to whether to work remotely or whether not to. And that seems to come into play as well. There've been this tradition, I think, within tech even of bringing in people from countries outside the U.S. Where they could work there and whatnot. And now maybe they don't even need to do that. I've worked with engineering teams in India and stuff for ages, and they do just fine without being there physically. So that seems to be a big milestone in that process too. Um, I know that we're coming up, a bit towards the end of the hour here. I wanted to talk a little bit more about, maybe what you're doing with your business and, what kind of services you provide. And, you talked a little bit about, how that got built into what it is right now. But, maybe what are you doing right now? What services you're providing, and, what are you looking to do in the future?
Sure. So, I mean, we, we've been running into some pretty strange situations as a business lately because a lot of people are starting to, because of the no like and trust factor that I'm getting a lot lately, they're starting to think that they want us to do things outside of what we've done, oddly
Right.
enough. So I've been building teams lately for doing separate things. Like one client right now wants us to pretty much become his full service agency because he trusts us that much. So in the past week, I put together 5 people and added them to my team, all with different skill sets, all my friends, and we're all going to be working on this project together.
That's great.
Uh, yeah, it's interesting. But for the most part, our main service, we have 2 main service offerings, right? Our first main service offering is geared towards other podcasters and people who have shows. And that is anywhere from helping grow it to creating micro social content for it to implementing VAs into their business, so virtual assistants that can pretty much take care of all of that for them too, from micro content to cold emailing guests to following and nurturing everyone that comes on the show to all the whole 9 yards. And then I also have, feeding into that, I have a VA implementation service that just helps businesses hire these VAs for, and they're like usually $5 an hour. We give it off to them, which is a lot of money to where they're from. And they're all fully trained by us with systems and processes to integrate into their business, whether for lead generation efforts or appointment setting, or something as simple as video editing and photo editing or copywriting, right? So they're all really, really trained by us and vetted by us. And then the third service offering that we're offering as well is LinkedIn automation and cold email for businesses for lead generation efforts. So really a lot of lead generation and a lot of creative. That's really what we're focusing on as a business. And that's where our strong suits lie. We're never going to run ads for people because we want to stay away from that.
Makes sense.
Yeah, we're never going to do any sort of web design or web development or anything like that. We want to be a strictly creative agency and a lead generation agency, organic lead generation agency. So that's the foundation we stand on.
It's a great path. So I think maybe the last question here, and then we can cut to the close. For you personally, as you've been on this journey, or just in life in general, do you have any recommendations for books? Any kind of education that has helped you along the way, and even your favorite types of other media?
Sure. So I love the book question because I've always got 3 listed in my head, right? The way I like to answer that question is if someone I know was to ask, or I had a birthday, what book would I give them?
Right.
There's 3 that always come to mind. So number 1, The Slight Edge. Fantastic book. Have you ever read Atomic Habits?
I have not. No.
So The Slight Edge, just the basic gist of the book is an action every single day leads to results, right? No one notices the small changes happening every day, but they go together and one day become something really, really big. And that can be both the positive and the negative, right? So in the positive sense, let's say you hit the gym just 30 minutes a day, or even just go for a mile run every single day or 30-minute walk, whatever, just small steps. In a year's time, you're probably going to be like 40 pounds lighter.
Nice.
And on the flip side of it, today you're ate pretty well, but you see a donut and you're like, you know what? I'm just gonna have a donut this one time. It's gonna be okay. Then tomorrow or 2 days later happens, and you see another thing. You know what? This small piece of food would be fine. Nothing's gonna happen. A year down the road, you see yourself 40 pounds overweight. You're like, how did this happen? So small actions lead to big results every single day. Small actions that are consistently done over time.
Absolutely.
The second book is The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. Fantastic book. I think anyone should read it if they feel like they have any trouble living in the present or have any anxiety or trauma or anything like that. It just helps you really focus down on what's important and the only thing that matters, which is the present, right? Nothing else really matters if you think about it. Not the future moment, not what's going to happen 10 minutes from now, not what's already happened, just what can you do at this very exact moment in the present. And that's a very dumbed down version of it, but if you read the book, you really get the gist of it, right? And then the final book that I would suggest is more of a digital marketing book. And there's a guy named Russell Brunson, and his book, he has a trilogy of 3 books. One's called .com Secrets, another one's called Expert Secrets, and another one's called Traffic Secrets. For any business owner, period, that wants to learn how to market their business, and those 3 books read as a trilogy is a fantastic foundational starting point to really understand everything that goes into marketing and that goes into sales and how to make money online.
Love it. And that's really interesting. You structure it as a trilogy. I don't get that one as often, but I think that helps everybody out in the audience that much more as they move along on their own paths. And I've heard a lot about Eckhart Tolle, but I have not read anything by him yet. So that's another interesting recommendation you put out there.
Good book. It's a really, really good book. Must read.
I'm gonna check that out. Cool. So coming up on the end here, the question of the hour, how do people reach you if they'd like to? And, maybe what's the address of your business and any other contact info?
Sure. So you can find me, let's go with Instagram, right? My business is online, so we don't have any physical address.
Right.
You can find me at Mr. Omar Mo. That's MROMARMO. And then my website is Mr. Omar Mo is taken, unfortunately. And my website is nomadscast.com. So that's NOMADSCAST.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Omar. And it's been really great to get to know a little bit more about your story and how you got where you are, especially watching the journey from, even a major, as we all can relate to in college that, we may or may not have used. I know mine is a little bit disparate and moving through life and, just kind of blazing your own path. So fantastic story, Omar, and look forward to catching up soon.
Thanks for having me on, Adam.
Thanks so much, Omar.